My guest today is Andrea Lynn Hembroff. She's the owner of Align Mold Consulting. The company aligns people who have environmental health issues with professionals who can treat and diagnose them. She does this by considering a client's resources and specific needs and then walking them through a multifaceted approach when she feels it's necessary for them to heal from environmental illness. Welcome to my show, Andrea.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So my first question is, what inspired you to start this company? Was there a personal story, a mission in terms of environmental health?
Yeah, I certainly didn't wake up one day and go, gosh, I really want to get into mold. My story, how I got into the industry is a lot like many others before me. So my education's in the sciences. I was pre-med at one point with a special interest in microbiology and chemistry. And then after I purchased my first house in 2017, and after moving into my new home, I got really sick and was mostly bedbound after about 2 years. And after kind of looking under every stone, treating Lyme disease out of pocket, we discovered that it was environmental. And by the time we realized it was environmentally triggered.
When you say environmental, I'm pretending I know nothing about this.
Okay, good.
Experience. There's probably listeners that don't understand Lyme disease is a common one people associate. Like Shania Twain thinks she was bitten by a tick, and that was what was caused her to have a rough time. Even Lost Me, where you skipped like once it was not. There was a leap there.
Let me
leap.
Let me backtrack. Sorry. So first off, we bought our house in 2017 because my 2-year-old daughter contracted lead poisoning from a home that we were renting in Minneapolis. And so we caught it right away, luckily. And so when we bought our first house, we were thinking about environmental things, right? We wanted to buy a house with no lead paint, which we did. We bought a house that was built in the 90s. And we moved into the home, and right after moving in, my health started to change. It started to decline. And at first it was strange things. And it was, I would say, well, maybe it's because I just had a baby. Maybe it's because I'm tired. And then after 2 years, it was, okay, something's really wrong. So I went to just a number of doctors because I was having migraines that would last months at a time, confusion, ringing in my ears, anxiety that was not typical. And I was finally diagnosed with late-stage Lyme disease and co-infections. And I'm an avid outdoors woman. I'm a forager of mushrooms, always in the woods. And so that made sense. And they think that I contracted Lyme disease years ago, and it went untreated. So then it was neurological. So that made sense. And we started treating that out of pocket for about a year to a tune of, probably close to tens of thousands of dollars, and I never improved. And at that time, I had started reading on Lyme disease and started reading about the connection between Lyme disease and mold toxicity. So for those that are listening that don't know, if folks with Lyme disease and I
got a lot going on in my head right now, because, and this is why I think a lot of people suffer, and how you help them, I think, is what we'll get to. You connect people with people they need to be connected with, because I think it's the doctors. They're trying, but they just don't know. So they start with Lyme, and they're really alternative, expensive treatments that a lot of insurance doesn't cover.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you're almost out of money, and you're still sick. As an engineer, what's still I'm like, can we stop there and talk about this? Is then they make the jump to mold as if they're connected, like directly connected.
Yeah.
It's just your body is sick. It's not like you had to be bitten by a tick now to be affected by mold, right?
Right. Yes. I like your thinking on that, because so often people in my communities, the mold illness communities, kind of get hyper focused on mycotoxins, and it's a toxic bucket issue. And so you can't be so hyper focused on one toxin that you disregard other toxins. So that I'm definitely giving you that.
that takes me down another rabbit hole every time with that conversation. I'm open-minded
Yes.
but as the engineer, I have to point out if the problem is mycotoxin, the source is more over your food that you eat mycotoxins, or you can't get rid of it. And how do you get rid of it? And it seems to me a lot of them don't even consider that as much as maybe they could.
Right. And Mike, we've known mycotoxins are in our food. We've known that for a long time. And in the US, it's so we're so permissible with our action levels. Other countries are like, nope, those mycotoxins are too high in that food. And the US is like, we'll take it.
I didn't know other countries test their food for
Well,
mycotoxins.
there's action levels. And I guess ours are, from what I've read, are more permissible than other
Oh,
countries.
actually, we do. So milk is a common example. Who would figure? But cows eat grains,
Yep.
and meat too. Horses, not horses. You don't eat horses. Cows but dairy cows. There's a limit on aflatoxin in the milk you drink
Yep.
because it can get so concentrated in the udder of a cow because that's where a lot of toxins go, or your
Yeah.
glands. Who would have known? And
Yeah. Aflatoxin M1, I believe, is what.
which gets me back to if I'm drinking milk and it could even be organic, which might even be more moldy, by the way. We're not treating the feed to prevent
Right. Right.
And now my organic cow is eating organic food, but has a lot of aflatoxins. How do I know if I go to my doctor, it's not my organic milk I need to stop in, not my house?
Right. And you nailed it. There's so many people that are navigating that. Like, is this a past exposure? Is this a current exposure? Am I getting exposed at school from my diet? And actually I do own Align Mold Consulting, and that's my side gig. And it's currently
Real quick before we make people too frustrated, right? Tell me what you think about this. My take on that is just test the house. No
Yes.
mold, move on. Mold, get rid of the mold, and then
Right.
move on.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I believe that there is an appropriate place to start that process. And I also think it's really important for folks to understand the limitations with each and every test that they're investing in. Folks need to know that there's always going to be limitations with a non-invasive inspection.
Oh, that's a good point, because then if you do the wrong test and it
Right.
finds no mold and you do have mold,
Right.
you're not going to get well. But vice versa happens too, in my experience. People
Right.
use a test that makes them think they have mold,
Yep.
and they spend all their money and years trying to find the mold, convinced it's there, Dan. I'm telling you, I'm like,
Right.
and they didn't even listen to me. I'm like, I can't find it. It's like, your test is better than anything I've done. I can't find it. And they're
Right.
stuck on that.
Right, and that's why it's important to understand the tests that you're using. By the way, I'm a really big fan of yours, and I have, besides your rock climbing books, I have every one of your books on my shelves, and
Thank
I
you.
reference them often. Every day, I reference your books. And one thing I really love about your books is, I'm very scientific. I love to read. I read textbooks on the weekend for fun. I'm a real hoot on the weekends. But folks with that are mold sick, a lot of us have inflammation in our brains, and so it just makes anything difficult. And one thing that I really, really love and appreciate about your books is that they're succinct, they're precise, and they're so approachable. You're
Thank
such
you.
a smart dude, and it's just like you put these books together with that in mind. And sometimes I'm talking to people because I love the sciences. I'm my mycology enthusiast too, which is ironic. But sometimes people have to be like, all right, dumb it down for a minute, dumb it down for me, like in a way that I can understand. And your books they're so helpful. Absolutely love them.
I tried to make them so you could understand them.
Absolutely. You nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. And I refer to your book often on the section on ERMI. I forget if it's in Dust Money or Mold Money. And I refer people to that chapter a lot because it was the first thing that I read on ERMI that the light bulbs went off.
And for those who don't know, your first experience with mold, if you're listening, is ERMI is I'm going to say this right, the environmental mold relative is the key word, mold index, which is an index on how moldy your house is. Kind of. It's how much mold was found in your house compared to other houses in the United States. Kind of.
It's a terribly misused
Yeah.
an outdated way of testing your house, and oftentimes that's what I see is people will.
It was a research project.
Exactly.
People jumped on the bandwagon, the labs did, because it was $100,000 piece of equipment they had to pay for. So they started pushing it heavy on home inspectors, and before you knew it, real estate salespeople were telling me I didn't know what I was doing because I wasn't using it. I'm like, what is this?
I laughed at that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took off, and to where today very few people like you know, actually, maybe this is not the best test to use. I should.
No, and it leaves such an opportunity too for folks to get taken advantage of, in my opinion and experience. Dust testing in general, I've seen people spend 30 grand on remediation that just involves removing the dust. So it's problematic. But anyways, I love your books, and please keep writing them.
Thanks for the plug.
They're a great resource, but specifically because they're so approachable and easy for everybody to understand. So
walk me through your process. I watched one of your videos where you were being interviewed, and you told people you were telling explaining how to walk around outside your house, make sure water doesn't collect next to it, look for the places water could get in, because that's where you test for mold. And we've been speaking about, okay, let's test your house and get it out of the way, yes or no, so we can move on to the doctors, right?
Right. Well, testing your environment is one part of the process, and to your listeners, the one thing that I would say is, because people say, Andrea, what's the best test? And there is no one perfect test, and mold testing should always be used as one tool alongside other tools, but with a very clear objective in mind. And what I mean by that is a homeowner's objective in testing their house might be really different from a renter's objective. For example, I've come across renters that their objective in testing is to get out of a lease. They know that the home is making them sick. They need a data point that will help them get out of a lease. Some renters test to litigate. But if you own your home, your main objective should be to identify sources of moisture, both past and present, and 2, to determine exactly what building material is affected. And oftentimes people get so overwhelmed, they kind of miss the forest for the trees, and they get so stuck on collecting data points that really don't move them forward. So where you start in testing your home, in my opinion, you're so much wiser than me, is by taking a very holistic indirect approach, meaning look at the whole dang house. It's a living and breathing entity. Air moves, and so do contaminants. So look at the whole house. Look for moisture. A good mold inspector is not just somebody that knows about mold and mold testing. That's obviously a really important part of it, but also somebody that knows changing building codes, how to identify building defects, knowing where to look for moisture and why it's there. Because as I've learned in my journeys with my lemon of a house that I bought, sometimes it's not very obvious. And
you brought up a good point earlier, or what came to my mind when you were speaking is, and if I was listening, okay, let me look in the phone book and find a mold inspector. And what's the next thing people do? How much?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, well, shouldn't it be a mold test, a mold test, a mold test, a mold inspector, a mold inspectors, and then you start looking for the cheapest one, and that's the worst. You're looking for like the most inexperienced.
Well, but also some of the most expensive inspectors are predatory. You want to developing a sampling plan. Because I love environmental testing. That's what I read about on the weekends. And so, developing a good sampling plan is important. And if I can share a story.
Sure.
I got really sick, and by the time we figured out it was mold in our house, we were out of money. So we moved out to a tent, where we lived in a tent with our small children and dogs for about 3 months. And I read everything that I could, and your books included, of course, but everything I could on mold remediation, indoor air quality, you name it. And we remediated our house multiple times because we just kept finding issues, and my health greatly improved. And so I was able to go back to work. I forced my way into the industry and have been feeling great for 3 years. And then my health started to decline again. And again, I thought, well, is it Lyme? Am I doing too much? Is it just that time in my age for me as a woman? And so I traveled, I went away, I visited a friend out of state, came back home, and was definitely feeling symptomatic in my bedroom. And we moved out of the bedroom, started sleeping in another room. And sure enough, I said, yep, okay, I feel different when we're out of the bedroom. And then we moved the family out to the camper. So because I was in the industry, I had access to some of the best local inspectors. I had access to a lot of testing methodologies, some that weren't even on the market yet. And we ran a variety of tests in that bedroom. We did wall cavity sampling, the basic spore trap sampling. We did a dust test that identified mycotoxins through mass spec, which should have been so superior, and did a very thorough inspection with thermal imaging, moisture meters, a really knowledgeable inspector, and nothing came back actionable. It looked clean. But I was really adamant, and I had access to the AMEA, which is a relatively new technology. It stands for the Airborne Mycotoxin Environmental Analysis by Respirarelabs. And we ran that, and it came back off the charts with aflatoxins, ochratoxin A, and trichothecenes. And so I was pretty sure that test was correct. And so we underwent exploratory remediation, which involved residing the house. I had some theories about maybe mold being behind the siding, in between the building envelope and the siding. And so we found mold behind the siding near my bedroom, nowhere else. And then once the siding was off, we discovered that the windows were improperly flashed, and they were extremely moldy. And so there are always going to be those situations where you can't know if there's mold there or water damage until you take it apart.
Take it apart.
Yeah, but how do you?
Did you do the cultured air samples, the malt extract egg or something like that?
No, we what is it? The Anderson impactor? Yeah. No, we didn't.
I just mentioned that because if the mycotoxins test picked up what was in the air, I can see why the spore traps didn't. They're kind of not useless, but 40-50% at best.
Right. Well, what's exciting about the AMEA is that the sample collection that it uses meets international standards. So it's taken with an IOM sampler, which was developed by the Institute of Occupational Medicine, and so it's not new technology. OSHA would use it. Industrial hygienists, they hook the IOM sampler to a worker's lapel, and
it's a long term, like you wear it around for a while,
like 8 hours. That's how. And of course, we're not doing that. We put it on a tripod and take the sample for 1 hour at 2 liters per minute. But we have had clients wear it. So I work for Respirarelabs now. I know that. I chased them down for a year. I'm not joking. I was like, hire me. This is incredible. But we did have a client that he had a sick kiddo, and they were convinced it was at the school. So they went to the school and had them test, and were met with quite a bit resistance. So they took it into their own hands and put the IOM sampler on their kiddo and put the pump in his backpack, and the results came back with very high mycotoxins. And so they pulled their kiddo out of that school, and the child is now very healthy. They put him in a new school and tested that school. But
you seem to be doing well too.
I'm great. Ever since the exploratory remediation that we did was extremely expensive, but my husband and I knew that mold has such an effect on me, and having that data point, that that AMEA sample,
taking the siding off.
Yep.
Which, by the way, I've almost never seen a building flashed correctly. I know that seems incredulous to people,
No.
If you know what to look for, you'll see it everywhere you go. Stuff installed, windows being put wrong in new buildings.
Well, the windows that were not flashed properly were not original to the house. The previous homeowner had replaced them about 11, 12 years before we bought the property.
You can't literally put new windows in and flash them properly unless you take all the siding off. There's no way to, and you think you're getting new windows, might work for keeping the heat in or the air conditioning, but that's going to make things worse in terms of it leaking unless you take the whole thing apart, right?
Yeah, our exploratory remediation, the bill kept growing because we're like, well, we got to get new windows now. So it was, but I feel great. I feel really good. So
then what's the next step? Let's say is there another step in your business? There's the part where you connect people with doctors where once you find out you don't have mold in your house using whatever testing you do, or you find there's mold in your house and get rid of it, what's the next step?
So, Mike, in my consulting business, I do a lot of different things for different people. So sometimes people will hire me to explain things to their spouse. Having a spouse that's on board is huge, and it's a huge issue in our communities. You see a lot of divorce in the the world of mold illness.
Well, it's because you're crazy. I had it tested for mold. The mold tester didn't find anything, and we spent $10,000. And I get it. I get both sides of it.
Yeah, I get it too, and I'm really lucky. I've got a really good husband, and I think maybe he thought I was crazy at first, but he never said that. And then he saw me come back to life. He saw I'm so outgoing and articulate, and then I couldn't speak a sentence. I was having seizure-like episodes. I thought my oldest son was my little brother. I'd forget the kids' names. And then he saw me come back to life when we were away from the home. So he believes me now. And I could say, hey, honey, we have to burn the house down. And he'd be like, all right, where's the gas and the matches? And so he's pretty easygoing, but it wasn't always.
It's the house. I'll burn the house down.
So with the consulting, which I have that on a back burner right now just because I'm really excited about what I'm doing with Respirarelabs. I think that I have a lot to learn. And also, I really do think that this new technology could change things, hopefully leading to policy reform legislation. I mean, it's standardized, right? So, and it's incredible.
Well, the collection is a standardized.
The collection.
The actual data interpretation, I'm going to guess, is not standardized.
It's ELISA, so not new technology.
Yeah, that's what I mean is the technique for collecting the air sample.
Yes, is standardized. Yep.
But that's just how I collect it, not what do I do with it? What does it mean? Is there mold or not?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. I'm curious because with normal air sampling, you take an outside for comparison. Do you do that with this too?
That's a good question. No. So first off, the test came to be, these Australian researchers were like, yeah, these people are like me are crazy. There's not enough mycotoxins in the indoor environment to warrant a concern. And so they developed this test and obviously proved themselves wrong. And so when they were developing it, what they did is they obtained background levels. So what they did is they tested a number of clean houses, and to meet that criteria, they had to be homes with no known water damage, no symptomatic.
But how do we know
occupants.
that the houses they tested that see were clean weren't like yours were?
Right. Yep.
And now
absolutely.
That data point is in what they're clean. This is kind of where my question's driving you to. How'd you come up with?
No, this is good.
And why don't you take an outside one anyhow? Is it because of the cost?
No, the reasons I've been given is they're just two different environments. And so they from what they found is there just should not be detectable mycotoxins in the indoor space. So.
And if you took one outside, would there not be detectable, or would there?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I have a pump right here. Maybe I'll take one.
Theoretically, there can't be. Otherwise, the test doesn't work.
Well, right. I mean,
you'd get false positives is what I mean.
Right.
You think your house has mold. Because what if like you lived on the farm and there's a big compost pile or something like that?
Well, actually, that it's funny that you say that because, people always ask about the control sample. And, I say, well, I'd probably take one outside if I live next to a farm, because there's obviously a lot of mycotoxins in corn and things like that. So, to be can't.
So you got this baseline, and I guess that makes it easier from the study. I can
Yeah.
follow that. There's a similar technology, use enzymes, mycometer. I think it's the mycometer. Also came from the Danish or some European country. Uh, but they have such different climates there too, in terms of the
Yeah.
mold and the
Yeah.
seasons and stuff. So that answered my question. Good. Well, it seems like you're trying to save other people's lives now because you saved your own.
Well, I'm learning, and there's been a lot to learn, and I think that my role in this industry it's very unique. I'm a connector of people, so I was, I wanted to be a doctor, which I didn't get there, and so my biggest goal and passion is connecting indoor environmentalists with doctors, because what we see so often is these doctors should stay in their lane and IEPs should stay in their lane. And that's, and
By
I
IEP, she means the mold inspector,
sorry, the
indoor environmental.
indoor environmental professional. Thank you. So
What
many
happens
acronyms.
is, for example, the doctors are the ones who started the ERMI,
Yeah.
which they don't know nothing about testing houses for mold, and yet they're telling people test your house for mold. And then I'm like, hey, if I was a doctor, I wouldn't. What's your blood pressure today? Or should I,
Right.
I should show up and
Right.
let me check your heartbeat. What are you talking about? It's not your job. They should, you should do your specialty and
Well, right. And they're such an important person in this person's journey, because these people, well, my doctor told me to do an ERMI, or my doctor told me to do a HERTSMI. It's like, unfortunately, they're not understanding. And when you're looking at environmental testing, you have to understand the strengths and limitations in so many aspects, right? On the sample collection, right? There's limitations with each and every sample collection methodology. And then you have to look at the data analysis used in the lab, whether it's mass spec or ELISA or, PCR, and know those limitations, and then how to interpret.
I just got a question popped in my head because I'm keeping an open mind on your myco air test.
Yeah, no, I am. Yes, I
Okay.
like it.
So what comes to mind? I just imagined I was an actual person doing it and I get a hit. I don't know where the mold is. Like you took your siding apart because
Right.
you knew maybe where have I not looked? Where have I not done a wall test or anything else? What's a normal person to do next? Call a mold inspector, an IEP?
I mean, ideally, it will be an IEP taking these samples, but Respirarelabs just launched a do-it-yourself option and affiliate program, so it makes this data point available for anybody, no matter where you are. But ideally, you will always have a professional doing those things, because they're going to do an investigation. You cannot discount the importance on having a thorough investigation.
But speaking of IEPs, that term was invented, indoor environmental professional. You don't have to be certified to call yourself an IEP.
No,
Right?
no, and the one accreditation I got in the industry, which I've let expire because I don't do inspections. I like to learn everything I can. I could have done that in my sleep. And so a lot of these, I've seen a lot of companies offering very expensive inspections with that very modest certification. It's just like,
Well, an IEP is not a certification.
no,
It's
no.
just
I was talking like a CRIE through the ACAC, but. Yeah, so a good, for me, a good indoor environmental professional. I like people that have a lot of background and knowledge in the building construction side of things, that know the bones of the home. Somebody that knows the anatomy of the house, right? It's kind of analogous to expecting.
So let's say I'm back to the ignorant homeowner. I heard the term IEP. Now I know anyone can call themselves that. Certification, we talked about, ACAC is the American Council for Accredited Certification.
Yeah.
The short story of the long story is when I joined that, because it was the most top level engineering mold inspector standard you could get. It was like, even for me as an engineer, if I can be a certified microbial consultant by ACAC, I mean, that requires 5 to 8 years of experience, even if you know what you're doing. But what happened, so you understand, because the certification by ACAC that you mentioned, which is not, what is that? It's kind of not worth much. They were up against money. As a nonprofit, how do we stay alive? Because what happened with the home inspectors, it used to only be you'd have to get an ASHE, American Home Inspector certification, which you'd have to apprenticeship. Well, Nick, whatever his name is, like, heck with that. I'm going to start my own home inspector certification group. And that's what all the competitors now. You just pay us. We'll give you a certification. So ACAC had to create some entry-level certifications. And
Yep.
that's what you're referring to.
Yep.
The trouble with that is now they have 10 different levels of certification. And I'm like, guys,
I know.
diluting my certification. No one's going to understand.
Right. No,
It's complex now. But there are better levels of, if you really want to do your homework, I still think the ACAC, American Council for Accredited Certification, there are upper levels. If you take the time to understand which certs have more experience, they're 90% there if you get to the upper ones. By that, I mean, I have privilege to I'm on the board. So I can kind of see who's fallen through the cracks. It's pretty tight. It's pretty tight at the high end.
Yep.
What would your recommendation be?
What
would your recommendation be? Finding a building, someone who's a builder is great, but then they're not a scientist. Is that when they come back to your test, come back to you and go work with me?
It's hard. It's, in my opinion, it's hard to find, the unicorn of a mold inspector, because ideally you want somebody that's really well-rounded, right? Somebody that knows the building sciences, the building construction end of things, plus, with some scientific background and understanding these tests and interpreting them in order to, so oftentimes I'll see mold inspectors say, well, I didn't see anything. This house is clean. There's nothing here. It's
not to mention mold is microscopic and he can't see it with the naked eye.
Not to go back to, I like medical analogies, but when you go into the doctor and you say, Dr. Sy, I don't feel good. They're never going to start off with an MRI and exploratory surgery. And if your doctor does do that, you need to find a new doctor. But typically what they'll do is they'll do a physical exam, maybe take your blood pressure, maybe run a basic blood panel, right? And sometimes that guides their path. And sometimes the blood samples looks good. Hey, your labs looked good. I'm going to send you to this specialist, or I'm going to order this test. And so diagnosing a home, in my opinion, is much the same. You start zoomed out, right? You start with this very thorough visual inspection using thermal imaging, moisture meters, a good flashlight. And there's a time and a place for everything. There's a time and a place for exploratory remediation like we did. And so you want to be cognizant of where you're putting your resources.
What if I'm going to pretend I'm a person now, I'm sick. I do that exploratory. And also my spouse is with me. Back to we're having to, you're crazy or not. The mold inspector didn't find anything, honey. You sure you want to keep going? That's when we would go, okay, maybe we do some air testing, like you're into now, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the AMEA, it's not cheap and it's not unattainable, but there's, a lot of the people like me don't have any resources. And so I've had clients they're just tapped out. They've done everything. They can't find it. And I encourage them, like, well, maybe go camping for a couple of weeks. Some fresh air in the mountains would do you good anyways. But sometimes it's just taking yourself out of that environment. And
good point. Even the houses that I find, take yours with the siding.
Yeah.
Can we get 100,000% of it out? I mean, we take the whole house apart. Why don't you sell it to someone who doesn't care? They're going to remodel it anyhow. get good money for, or break even, whatever, or what, it's your health, move. Well, but then you got to make sure you move into a healthy house.
Well, and that's just the thing is, even with the issues in my home, I feel better in my home than anywhere else. I don't use scented products. We've invested in a good dehumidifier, a whole home air purification system. And that's always my bottom line is always be cognizant with your resources. And because there's so many ways we can improve our indoor air quality. And so, and there is no perfect house. Also, and I feel really good in my house. And,
but what I meant was if you couldn't find it, for the people who, we had the mold inspector, didn't see anything. We did this test, didn't find anything. I'm still sick. I go away, I feel better. That kind of conundrum. Yeah. You either really got to commit and go, we're going to find it.
Yeah.
Or
in situations like that, and that's why in my consulting work, there is no right path forward. So some people have supportive spouses, some people have tons of money, some people have friends or family they can go live with. And so you have to really meet people where they're at and figure out their way forward. But in situations like that, it's really hard. Like, how attached are you to this house? I mean, if you can't figure it out, you can't figure it out. And it's not always so straightforward, but that's why it's good to be, cognizant of your resources and make, educated decisions, because we ran out of money. I mean, that's how I became a professional. And, the first couple times we remediated, I got rid of everything because I was told I had to, that you'll never heal if you don't.
You mean your stuff?
Yes.
Your stuff.
Yes. And I would not. After like the third, fourth, and fifth time, we're like, let's wipe it down, let's clean it. So you have to be realistic.
I wonder who started that. You need to get rid of all your stuff. Mold did not grow on your stuff. It grew in the wall in your house. Why are you throwing all your stuff away?
Well, and mycotoxins, right? And mycotoxins are sticky in nature. So what we're seeing on the lab testing, because at Respirarelabs we have a surface sample too. It's called the MESA, and they're finding that mycotoxins typically don't travel far from the water damage source, and so part of what we're aiming to do with Respirarelabs is just encourage remedial protocols that are effective, but that people can afford. And I've seen people.
That gets us back to it's telling you there is mold, but it doesn't tell you where.
Well, we're simplifying the process, but yes, say you like in my room. Okay, we know that issue was there. We found it. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have money to have a company come in and do a small particulate clean. And I don't know if you've ever seen a proposal on those services. They're insane.
Well, actually, I'm probably a guy who, not the first, but way back 20 years ago, I didn't call them whatever you just called them, but we didn't clean. It's the practical thing to do. Construction, mold.
Yeah.
And I would get to people who are so sensitive. Like, okay, must be we just didn't clean good enough.
Right.
And I would do a proposal. I would write specs that to do it. I've never, ever seen a company, even with me watching, that does what you paid them to do. And these are good companies. Knowing who I was watching, I'm like staggered by, are you serious? You're going to get a ladder. Are you going to use a ladder to get up to the light fixture? What kind of vacuum did you bring? No attachments, no ladders, in and out. If you weren't watching, so which gets us to people think it didn't work and it didn't get done.
Right, and I'm a neat freak, so small particulate cleaning is just another Tuesday for me. That's just how I clean my house. But I did all of it in my own home. I emptied the house, and I was very sick when I did it, but it seemed to work for us.
Well, yeah, you mentioned you emptied your house, which is a key thing. You can't really clean it and clean your stuff unless you take all your stuff out. Yeah. That's what I mean. People, no one almost ever does like you just did, empties the house.
Well, and I'm a very attentive to detail anyways, and thank God for that. but some people aren't. And it was overwhelming. I'm not going to say it was
It's
easy.
a lot of work. Yeah.
I was really sick. I have 3 kids. But it's what we had to do. So I binned everything. I got rid of anything that didn't have
Well,
value.
how old are your kids? Did they help?
Oh God, no, at the time they were really little. They were, oh God, 4 and
Could I have
5.
2 brothers and we're only a year or 2 apart? When we were big enough, the 3 of us, always doing something on the weekend.
They're good kids, but they were so little when we went through this, and they're funny too. They know more about mold and water damage and air quality than most people. We'll be driving down the road like, Mom, you should probably stop at that house and give them a card. Did you see their gutters? Just like, yes.
Yeah, or the windows, the way they're flashing the windows on that new building.
They're incredibly intelligent, but it was scary. It was a lot of work. But there's a lot of people that spend big money having those services without remediation.
Which services?
Like these small particulate cleans. Like I recently had a client on the West Coast, and she says, well, I just got done with a $30,000 remediation. I said, okay, well, what did they do? What was the source of moisture? What did they remove? Well, they just cleaned. And they did this, they proposed this protocol based off of dust testing. I think they did an AMEA and an ELISA, nothing else, just that, and said, oh my gosh, there's this in the dust in your home. So they sold her this cleaning protocol for $30,000. And that's
And it worked for her. She felt better a little bit.
Well, temporarily.
What comes to mind, I've done that for people who live on the side of a dirt road.
Yeah.
And it's always dirty. And I test their house, can't find mold.
Yeah.
You know what? Your house is pretty dusty. Do what you're speaking of. Take everything out, clean it. And they felt better. And you'd walk into the house and it would smell neutral. It'd smell clean.
Yeah.
What you just mentioned is, though, if you do have mold, then it's going to come back. It's like a temporary relief because your body's not overwhelmed by both.
Exactly. Yeah. And I unfortunately, I see that a lot. So it's always good to keep your house
Also,
clean.
I tell people, if you're listening, don't clean the house till you test it for mold, because if there's mold and you find it, you're going to want to save the $30,000 in cleaning until after you tear everything up and rebuild it. Even the reconstruction, the dust from reconstruction's going to make a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's a lot of people that are sick, a lot of people getting taken advantage of, a lot of people making big bucks off of families like ours. And I wanted to get into the industry to be a voice for people like me. There's a lot of doctors that just cannot be bothered to learn about anything but ERMI, and
they're interesting. Well, the pharmaceutical people probably did this to them, always knocking on their door and talk to them.
No, I agree, and I get it.
Yeah, if you're not one of those guys, just a woman, you're not getting in to talk to the doctors without that.
Right.
Is there anything I haven't asked you? I want to come back to your test before we do anything in general that I haven't asked you.
I don't know. I feel like we are all over the place, which is pretty in line with how I am. No, I'm so grateful to be here. It's you're kind of I'm such a fan of you in our house. Thanks. And so I said to my husband, I said, I get to meet Daniel Stye. And I think he was a little worried. I said, don't worry,
Going through my questions, I think we more or less told people, if I pretend I'm a listener who is sick, basically, and I've heard of mold, what do I do next? We've helped them. So coming back to your test, because it sounds like now you would do the consulting because you're good at it and you like it, but you're excited about this test. So tell me more as engineer, skeptical but open-minded.
Yep, I like it.
I could have a compost thing I'm not taking it outside. Why don't I take outside? It's expensive. Is it a few $100s minimum, these tests?
$395 for the first air test, $245 for each subsequent, and that's with the do-it-yourself option. I don't know. I'm curious too, because I like control samples. I'm a scientist at heart, and I like to see data points.
Is it possible you mentioned, and I kind of understand that logic and would agree with it, if it's so high off the chart, there's no way, because that's kind of a wall test works too. You stick the tube into the wall,
Right.
you tap on the wall, you suck the air out of the wall. You could compare it to a clean wall.
Right.
Don't compare it to outside because the wall is dirty. That's not going to
Right.
help. But you could compare it to another wall in your house, but you don't need to if it comes back with a million Stachybotrys mold spores when it shouldn't be there at all. Is
Right.
it that kind of thing, this air test?
Well, let me level with you. These mycotoxins, for folks that are listening that don't know, so mold is ubiquitous in nature, and people like to. I love fungi, by the way. I was reading about fungi long before I knew mold was a thing, and made me sick. But fungi is incredible, and mold is ubiquitous in nature. And when you hear that, what people mean is that there will always be mold spores in the air. So you're going to be really hard pressed to not find mold spores in the air, but knowing what genus these mold spores belong to is very useful. So mold is characterized by water activity needed to grow on building materials. So within some of these, what we call water damaged molds, are these molds that have the capacity to form a secondary metabolite. And a secondary metabolite is a metabolite that's rendered from a process that's not
Essential
life
for life.
sustaining. Yep, not essential
They don't
for
need
life.
to do it. They'd live without doing it.
Yep. So it's like the mold's defense mechanism. I like to think of it as their switchblade. So when mold feels threatened, that's when it releases these mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are known and documented carcinogens, neurotoxins, nephrotoxins, hepatotoxins. They should not be in our air. And it doesn't matter if you're hypersensitive like I am, which I think is a blessing. For me, it's like a sixth sense. I moved into this house and I was like, something's off, something's wrong. The previous homeowner of my house, she was here 20 years. She died of liver and lung cancer. And she was diagnosed in January. She was dead by June. And we bought the house in October. And by the way, 2 months after we moved into the house, our dog died. She was 5, and she was fine, and then she wasn't. But one of the things that we found in really high levels in my bedroom was aflatoxin. And aflatoxin, if you read up on it, is one of the most known potent carcinogens known to man.
That's what's in the milk. The FDA has limits on cow's milk, as I mentioned. But like you say, they're probably really high limits, but still, like we're drinking a lot of carcinogenic milk. I thought milk was supposed to be good for you.
Right. And so it's not just for hypersensitive people. We should not be breathing these toxins in. And they're starting, Dr. Dale Bredesen, huge fan of him. He's connected with Alzheimer's and dementia to mycotoxin exposure. So
if you test your air now, do you find nothing? Because you said you always find something.
I just did a post test yesterday. And then what I'm going to do with the AMEA, because my mind's like a hamster wheel, is I'm wondering for people that, like, say I was renting this house and I'm not going to do an AMEA in each room. I just want to know, am I being exposed here or not? I'm going to wear it. I'm going to wear the IOM sampler, throw the pump in the backpack, and I'm going to wear it while I do my chores. And so I think it is. I feel good.
If you were renting, I tell people before you rent, see if you can rent it for a night.
Right.
And if I did, I'd wear that thing for the night or something like that, or at least.
On my shelf, and one of the books that I recommend the most to people, and I bought it I wasn't renting, but is Rent Money. And this, I can't believe this thing is still intact because I have referenced it and shared this book with so many people. But if you are renting and you're navigating mold, Daniel Stey's book, Rent Money, it's a great book.
Probably noticed if I wrote that, I put myself on both sides. I'm defending the renter and I'm defending the landlord, because there are times when there's a lot of mold and the renter, it's bad, fix it. And then there's times when people are just trying to get out of their lease.
Yep. And I have actually recommended this book to a number of landlords too. And I'm good with landlords. They appreciate my pragmatic approach, but it's a great resource, whether you're a property owner or a renter. So just one of the many good books from Mr. Stein.
I tried to pretend I was a renter, both ways, sick or just trying to get on my lease. What could I do? And then the landlord, okay, what should we do first? Not call the mold tester, like you were saying, look around for show me the mold. But it gets really heated, there's a lot of emotions, there's money.
There's a ton of emotions, and I would be so nerve-wracking knowing what I do being a landlord or a property owner. Like, my husband and I, we finished this remediation. It was crazy expensive. It involved a second mortgage. I don't know how we're eating this year. And he said to me, he goes, well, do you think we got it all? And I said, no, I'm pretty sure. There's definitely areas of my house that if I was to continue looking for it, I would find something. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard
But you're better now.
Oh, I feel great.
I think like the stress and the worry and the fatigue is, it's not helping your immune system. So it's some point, it's not a perfect world, right?
No, it's not. It's not. And you have to be realistic. And part of my healing also involved brain rewiring and just pulling my limbic system out of that state of fight or flight. Mm-hmm. It's just not a good place to be when you're healing. And so it's
because our bodies do have these mechanisms, the liver and the lungs, to cough up particles, to detoxify, to create enzymes to help detoxify, et cetera, et cetera. We're built for living outside, technically, probably. Who knows where there's some mold or something. So at some point, some is normal, is what I guess I'm getting at, right?
Right. Well, and some of us just are genetically predisposed. Women seem to be affected more, and I don't know if that's just because we have more.
My theory on that, but it's just a theory, it has no data at all. I'm just trying to connect dots. And not just say, women are more sensitive to.
No, I have theories too. So
women are more okay. I think that I'm trying to remember my thought. I think it's to do with the stress factor, because women, whether it's the hormones or they are more sensitive, their stress levels tend to be higher, and maybe that's taking down their immune system. I think with women, the stress is a bigger factor.
Right.
Not exactly the chemicals biologically, even though that's a little factor too.
No, I think that could definitely be a factor. If you are in a state of fight or flight, like if somebody's trying to kick down your door and kill you, you're not cleaning your house, right? You're defending your home. So if your body is stressed or in a state of fight or flight, you're not going to be restoring, you're not going to be detoxing, you're not going to be, doing all those things. But also, and I've read, and don't quote me on this because I haven't actually read the data on it, but I've read that testosterone downregulates autoimmunity, so men just detox better. But also, I work, but I work from home. I'm home much more than my husband is, and I'm much smaller than him. But I think there's just a lot of factors at play. But I have run into many families where it's the husband that is sick and not the wife. Not a ton, but it does happen. And usually there's a Lyme infection or an autoimmune disorder or something to that effect. But again, and I want to stress this, I'm very grateful for my hypersensitivity because I feel like it's a secret power. My body was like, nope, something's wrong in this house, and so maybe I will have avoided a future cancer diagnosis.
You might live longer. It's a longevity program.
Yeah,
the longevity is the latest thing. It seems.
Yeah. So, and you asked me about the AMEA, and I'll be this. And now this is not scientific, but because I've been in the industry and I worked with a company where we ran this test a lot. I've been with running a lot of tests where I felt great, and that AMEA test did not show anything. And so from my mold radar, it's right on. If I have felt like I was being affected somewhere, which is again not science.
It's a new technology. It's a startup, just a couple years old.
Well, the technology started in about 2016, 2017 in Australia. And then my boss, started it here in the US. So it's growing, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. My boss he's a good dude. He used to be a remediator, and he saw just a ton of people be sick, and he's like, we did everything right. We removed the mold, but these families he knew that there was something being left behind. And so when this lab approached him, he came out of retirement, and now this is what he does. And after a year of chasing them down, they hired me. So I'm brand
Well,
new
you're
to
good. Yeah. You also, I haven't met few, since I'm the mold guy and I'm always talking to doctors and other professionals, you're one of the cream of the crop in terms of talking intelligently.
Thank you.
And not just because you plugged my books, but
No, that's
you seem to actually be not making up nonsense stuff
yeah. That's the best compliment, especially from you. So, and thank you. I'm very pragmatic. You have to be realistic, and I love the sciences, but there's, and that's the problem too, is these. Well, mycotoxins are throughout the entire house. Let's throw everything away. Cool. Where's the data on that?
Yeah, where's the logic? How about
Yeah, I mean, I get it, like me taking everything out of the house, cleaning everything,
well,
but
what
I
just
did that
came to
on my
mind when you said that is, if I can't clean my stuff, then how am I supposed to wipe the walls down and clean the walls? And if I can't do that, then nothing's going to work.
I from what I've been hearing and learning in my work is an alkaline product will do that. As far as removing mycotoxins from the air, they've figured out a way to do that too, and it's actually dehumidification.
Hmm.
So they
To remove the particles or do
yeah,
it
because
trap.
the mycotoxins are hydrophobic, so they'll sit on the water molecules. So while these remediators are remediating, they place air movers around the room. So you're getting all the air and then directing them towards the dehumidifier. So what seems to work is to amp up the humidity and then capture it by dehumidifying and then doing that again.
That's what somebody proposed to get rid of the nanoplastics. They
Okay.
called them, instead of dehumidifiers, moisture extractors or air moisture extractors.
Sure.
And their logic was these little particles in the air, or if you dehumidify, because particles stick to water droplets or
Yep.
something like that. Doesn't seem like a way to save the planet from nanoplastics. We're talking how many dehumidifiers are you going to put around, like in your yard or your roof, or everything? But maybe along the same lines, it's the dehumidification. There's another term for it besides dehumidifiers, is what I'm getting at.
I'll have to read up on that. I guess what's exciting to me about it is that and hopefully this gets put into a protocol. We are working with Normie right now, but this is equipment that every professional has, in the US, right? Dehumidifiers and air movers. There's no need for a proprietary product or a crazy expensive process, just so I'll be excited to see some studies and some published papers come out on it. But
send me anything new. I'd love to see it.
I absolutely, I'll spam you.
What I couldn't find. I normally, when I end the show, I give the website for my guest and their business. And your business is Align Mold Consulting. I
Yeah.
didn't see a website, or are you not doing that so much? Do you want to mention the website of the testing company that you're working for?
Yes. And and hear me when I say this. That's how excited I am about this. I love my consulting. I love to be my own boss, but I really do think that this air testing I hope it changes things, creates policy reform and legislation. But that website is Respirarelabs. So it looks like Respirare, but it's Respirare. It's Italian Italian for to breathe. So Respirarelabs, and it's pretty neat.
It's on your LinkedIn profile. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yes, do that. And yeah, I'm still doing the consulting, just not a lot.
If you beg her, people, she'll do it. She'll do consulting for you.
Usually I end up just working for free because unfortunately, a lot of these families just they don't have the money. So
I see. Well,
yeah.
thanks so much for being on my show, Andrea.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. I can't even tell you how big of a treat this was. So thanks for all the books you've put out. I have all of them except your mountain climbing books. I have a husband that hates heights, so I haven't climbed
It's the stories in the books, actually. I wrote those for the stories.
I know, actually, there's
Because
one
people
of them
think,
is,
oh, how do you climb a mountain that's never been climbed? You must be a real good climber. I'm terrified. And I went back 10 times and I was still terrified. And then I ran out of water and then I kept going. And it's the stories more than the height and being.
You're such an interesting dude. It was a pleasure meeting you. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrea. Have a great day.
You too.